Welcome back. Today we're diving into the pretty incredible story of Will Sally. It's a journey that takes a Canadian man from a life filled with chaos and tragedy to one of deep, unwavering faith. It's a radical transformation, and it all kicks off with a really stark prediction he made for himself.
Yeah, that's what he said. When someone asked him where he'd be if he hadn't found Islam, that was his answer: dead or in jail. I mean, that's heavy. So you have to ask, right? How did this guy manage to sidestep a future that, honestly, seemed pretty much locked in for him and so many others he grew up with?
Okay, so to really get this, we've got to go back to the beginning. Let's talk about where he came from. Picture this: a small town tucked away in the mountains of Western Canada. And in his house, religion wasn't just, not there, it was something they actively looked down on.
This was the vibe in his family. The idea of God, that was, and I'm quoting here, for weak people who needed a crunch. That's it. His only brush with organized religion was, get this, sometimes visiting a local Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall. And he mostly went just because he got to wear a suit and tie, which is kind of funny when you're a kid.
So, think about this. For years, the only thing he knew about Muslims came straight from the news after 9/11. That whole war on terror narrative, that was his entire education on Islam. Everything he thought it meant to be Muslim was built on that foundation of conflict and, well, fear.
And while all this is happening on the world stage, his own backyard was just falling apart. His town got absolutely slammed by a drug crisis. We're talking hard drugs. So for him, violence and death, this wasn't something you just see on TV. It was real. It was happening to his friends, people he grew up with.
And this tragedy, it wasn't just out there. It came right into his home. It hit him personally and hard. He lost his own sister to a fentanyl overdose, then his brother-in-law took his own life. I mean, just imagine. That was the reality he was waking up to every day. A world just crumbling.
So after all this constant loss, Will has this moment. A moment of, terrifying clarity. He looks around at everyone, at the paths his friends and his own family were on, and he asks himself that one huge question: where am I going to end up? And the answer hit him like a ton of bricks. He knew he had to make a change. A huge one. He just quit, cold turkey, walked away from all of it.
So leaving that life behind, that was step one. But step two, well, that was something he could have never, ever predicted. He moves to a new town, and one single meeting changes absolutely everything. He meets this woman who would later become his wife, and she's the very first Muslim he's ever had a real conversation with. And just like that, boom, everything he thought he knew, all those years of media programming, just collided with a real person. Her life was different. It was built on principles, on faith. It was the total opposite of the picture that had been painted for him. And he was just fascinated. I mean, she'd never been to a party, never had a drink, never had a boyfriend. To him, this was like hearing about someone from another planet. And get this, in their very first conversation, a 3-hour marathon, he just comes out and tells her, "We're going to get married."
But, just meeting her wasn't going to be enough. That one conversation lit a fire under him. It started this massive search for answers, a quest to figure out the truth for himself. He had to square what he was seeing with his own eyes with everything he'd been told his whole life.
So his journey to really believing, it happened in stages. First, there was the intellectual side. He listens to this lecture that just clicks. It feels like a blueprint for fixing society's problems. Then there's this analogy he hears about the heart being like a glass that you have to turn upright to fill it. That made sense to him. Then he learns about the Quran, and the fact that it's been unchanged for 1,400 years. That was huge. But the thing that sealed the deal, it wasn't in his head at all. It was all about a feeling.
Before he even saw the community praying, he heard it. He's at the mosque for the first time, and he hears the adhan, the call to prayer. Now, he doesn't understand a lick of Arabic, not a single word. But the sound, it was so powerful that he just starts crying. Tears are just rolling down his face. It was this raw, emotional thing that just bypassed his brain and went straight for the heart.
And then, right after that powerful moment, he sees it. The final piece of the puzzle. He walks in and sees all these men from literally all over the world. Pakistanis, Africans, you name it. Different backgrounds, different languages, all standing shoulder to shoulder, praying together as one unit. And that was it. That incredible unity was the final push he needed. He knew right then and there, this was it. And he took his shahada, his declaration of faith, right on the spot.
So, you'd think that's the end of the story, right? He found his faith, but nope, converting was just the start. Actually marrying the woman who kicked this whole thing off? Well, that was going to be a whole other challenge. A massive test of his faith and, let me tell you, his patience.
5 years. Think about that. 5 whole years. From that very first day he met her and said, "We're getting married." It took 5 years to actually happen. And yeah, it was not an easy 5 years. So check this out. Right after he converts, a mentor goes to her family for him. The answer? A hard no. Okay? So what does he do? For the next few years, he just dives into his faith. He studies, he grows, he actually becomes the imam of the local mosque. So they try again a few years later. And this time her mother's answer is even stronger. It's a no, and don't you ever ask again. Ouch.
And then something kind of crazy happens. It's Ramadan, during those last 10 special nights. And his future mother-in-law, she keeps hearing this absolutely beautiful voice making the call to prayer. She asks her husband, "Who is that?" And he tells her, "That's the guy you keep saying no to." Well, that same night, she's reading the Quran, and she comes across this one specific verse, a verse about giving people a chance, about not judging them. And just like that, everything changed.
And I mean, it changed instantly. Completely out of the blue, she sits down and writes him a letter. A letter that says, "I would be honored if you would marry my daughter." Just like that. The biggest obstacle was gone, and they got married not long after that.
Okay, so he's married, his life has a new foundation, but the journey wasn't over. Now he had to deal with his old life, specifically his family back home. They had to wrap their heads around this massive transformation.
And their reactions were, well, they were all over the place. His sisters kind of felt like he wasn't one of them anymore, like there was this new distance. His mom, when he told her, her reaction was basically, "What, you think we're stupid?" Like she already knew. But his dad had the hardest time. And it was about the name change. See, Will was the last male in the family line, so for his dad, changing his name felt like the end of their family legacy.
But even with those family struggles, Will just leaned into his new life. I mean, think about the full circle here. The guy who thought God was a crutch for the weak is now the imam. He's leading prayers, giving lectures, and he's out in the community talking to churches and schools about his faith. He found a purpose that was bigger than anything he'd ever known.
So, to wrap things up, he got asked this one really powerful question. If you could say one thing to all non-Muslims, what would you say? And his answer? It wasn't just a recap of his story. It was a real challenge to everyone listening. And that's where we'll leave it, with his final thought. He's convinced that the solution to all the problems he saw, the problems he ran from, that solution is out there. But he also believes, and this is the kicker, that it's being deliberately kept from people, kept from a world that he feels really, really needs to hear.